In Odyssey, Homer's epic poem, when Odysseus cried, "There is nothing worse for man than wandering," he was right in the metaphor, but not in physical reality. After months of lockdown, none of us need any reaffirmation of just how critical travel is, whether it's for business, leisure, or simply the joy of discovery. Travel is hardwired in our DNA. The question now is not if we want to travel, but how and when we can do so safely. On a macro level, how the travel and tourism industry is going to deal with what is nothing less than an existential crisis. How do you define essential travel? Isn't that relative, situational, and somewhat individual? In 2019, almost 11 million foreign visitors traveled to India. Within the country, Indians took over 1.8 billion trips for business and leisure. If you ask these people, most would consider the trips they took essential. Essential for work and eminently desirable for leisure. To make such prodigious travel possible, a juggernaut of allied industries, including hospitality, travel companies, transport and aviation, swung into action. The travel and tourism industry employs over 4 crore people in India and contributed 9.2% of the country's GDP in 2018. With sustained growth year after year, the industry was considered a touchstone for the Indian economy. Nothing, it seemed, could thwart its progress. Nothing except mortal fear, that is. In this pandemic-defined hierarchy of social behavior, travel has suddenly become dispensable, avoidable, and even irresponsible. While most of us deal with travel withdrawals, spare a thought for the country's 53,000 travel agents, 115,000 tour operators, 911,000 tourist transporters, thousands and thousands of hospitality companies and restaurants that today are teetering on the brink of ruin. On May 12, 2020, the government announced a 20 trillion rupee stimulus package to help the economy cope with the devastating blow dealt by the coronavirus lockdown. The package made no provisions for the travel and tourism industry. Hello and welcome. My name is Miraj Shah and this is Hard Reset, a series of virtual symposiums on WION. Our theme for today is travel and tourism in the post-COVID world. Now, experts concur that COVID isn't going anywhere anytime soon, but we're optimists, and that sets the tone for today's discussion. Putting their heads together in that endeavour are Rupinder Brar, Additional Director General, Ministry of Tourism, Government of India; Madhavan Menon, Chairman and Managing Director, Thomas Cook India; Rohit Kapoor, CEO, India and South Asia, OYO; and Ankur Bhatia, Executive Director of the Bird Group. A big welcome to all of you. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. Without further ado, I'd like to get the ball rolling by addressing the elephant in the room, the exclusion of the industry from the stimulus package announced by the Government of India. Now, I know that some of you have spoken about this on other forums, and really feel free to articulate your thoughts on that if you like. But I want to shift the focus a bit and talk not about why the travel industry needs help, but rather why a revival of the travel and tourism industry and the jobs that would save and potentially create could revive the entire economy. Madhavan, why don't you start?
Firstly, I believe that tourism is a multiplier, be it from a GDP perspective, from an employment perspective, as well as a foreign exchange earnings perspective. The minute tourists start arriving in this country, it will drive all these in terms of not just what the package that they pay for, but all the activities that they undertake during the course of their trip, the employment that they create during the course of that trip. The sort of purchasing that they do during the course of the trip. So in reality, tourism plays a very important role, and this has been acknowledged by the Honorable Prime Minister himself. And my expectation is that as things start opening up post-COVID-19 and international flights start coming into this country, as well as cross-border around the world, my expectation is that tourism will play a very important role.
Rupinder, your comments on that? I think the government is looking at incentivizing domestic tourism. When will the state borders open? Is there going to be a standardized accreditation for hotels and travel operators? Your take on this, on what the government is doing right now?
Thank you, Tirad. I think that's a very relevant question to ask in post-COVID times. Like they say that every adversity kind of adds value in terms of introspection. And I think one of the learnings for us has been that the role of accreditation and the role of organizing ourselves as an industry is a big learning in the post-COVID times. And yes, there will be therefore accreditation. We are very soon going to come out also for a logo which is going to be promoting the Dekho Apna Desh campaign, because there is a lot of focus on domestic tourism. In fact, to that extent, I would say that domestic tourism is something for which the Honorable Prime Minister has been mentioning even before COVID times, that we haven't tapped the kind of potential that exists for domestic tourism, and in the coming times it would be a thrust area, first more because we would be traveling more to the nearby places, and later also by choice and choosing to see the wonderful the bounties of nature, culture, heritage that we have in our own country. So yes, accreditation and certifications and organizing ourselves better as an industry is the way forward, and thrust on domestic tourism for sure, to not only create a pride or a sense of ownership for ourselves, but also generating a huge economic engine out of tourism for all of us.
Well, what about international travel? Are you putting together some kind of a PR initiative to sort of re-establish trust in potential customers to come back to India?
Absolutely, and as of now, you see, the whole world is still tentative about when is it going to be traveling, and so we are also part of the journey of the world as we meander our way forward for the post-COVID times. And very soon, like all other countries, we are sure in the ministry that Indians will also be receiving guests from all over the world as and when travel opens up. The narrative which we already had as a country that is very, very deep and wide in its potential of offerings, but in the coming times, the idea of creating a sense of confidence that we are a safe country is a narrative that we are going to really build on the PR part of it. And we will be pitching India as a strong country to visit. Yeah.
Rohit, how is it going? Reopening of hotels, what are the challenges you are facing? Because at the end of the day, I mean, hotels are the backbone, aren't they? I mean, nobody can travel unless the hotels are open and operational.
Yeah. So, Miraj, first of all, thank you for having me here.
You're welcome.
We started opening the hotels on 8th as per the Ministry of Home Affairs circular.
Right.
And about 16 states and 4 union territories, hotels have started opening up. I think the good news is that we are finding that hundreds of partners have started opening the hotels. Guests have started checking in, and the numbers are obviously they are way off pre-COVID levels, but they are starting to climb back up. Having said that, I totally agree with my previous panelist who, in terms of this is a golden opportunity for us to create the focus on domestic tourism that we have been speaking about for a long time.
Right.
So Dekho Apna Desh is going to be a big trend as soon as travel and leisure tourism picks up.
Right.
For that to happen though, the small hotels really need to be supported in these times. And I think that is where anything that the government can do for the smaller hoteliers, whether it's in form of loans, waivers, or moratoriums, or waivers on electricity bills, etc., that will be very welcome for the industry, because they have to survive first before they can support the country. And I'm sure those discussions are on at the right time that will happen. But having said that apart, just the opening of the hotel sector has been a big step forward. And as the months go by, and also the COVID pandemic, we get better control on that situation from a health standpoint.
Right.
I think the industry will start reviving in the medium term.
Rupinder, would you like to respond to that? I mean, smaller hotels obviously don't have deep pocket. They're going to need some support here.
Yes, you see, the ministry has been continuously in dialogue with the stakeholders, as well as carrying the needs and the demands of the industry to the Ministry of Finance. The Ministry of Finance being the domain ministry which looks at the macroeconomic and the more specific needs from the financing point of view. And, we are happy to say that a lot of things have come our way in terms of relaxation of moratoriums. There has been relaxation on the loans and the collaterals that would be required in part of the MSME sector support that has come. Since a large part of our industry is part of the MSME, we are very hopeful that some benefit will come our way. And as we go forward, I'm sure the government will be factoring in the needs of the industry, and we will be supporting the demands. So we are very, very positive in the way forward. As soon as travel is a little more happening, on the 8th of June, we've come out with the operational guidelines which work as a support for both the industry as well as for the travelers. So all this, I think, is going to go a long way in creating a sense of confidence in both the providers of services and the users of services.
Yeah, I agree. I think there is that trust has to come back. And Mr. Bhatia, your take on that, because I want to fly. When do you think and how do you think we're going to re-establish trust in people to be able to fly again?
Thanks. I think the situation is unfolding right now. When you would be able to fly, the flights are operational now. When would you be, one person will get a confidence to fly? I think it'll only happen once we do get a vaccine to this. But on the other side, what is happening is, of course, economies across the globe have started opening up slowly. A welcome move from the industry as well, that the hotels eventually started to open up. Unfortunately, the hotels in Delhi are still closed. So while we have flights coming in and out of the country, or in and out of the city, we've got the Delhi hotels closed, the neighbor Gurgaon and other hotels open. I think what needs to be done, I guess, in this particular regard is that there has to be a cohesive and, all the states and the centers would have to work together to ensure that the economy gets back to its normalcy as soon as possible. By given the circumstance, the virus is here to stay.
Sure.
Now, in part meal basis, when you start to do this thing, it's very difficult to forecast, to see how these things can actually start to come back. Now, look at the situation right now, as what we are talking. The hotels in Gurgaon apparently are open. Lots of functions haven't happened in Delhi for domestic tourism and other things as well over the last couple of months. And all these people are now transiting and going to Gurgaon to have these functions done. Or to Rajasthan. And so I think there has to be working together with the governments and the private sector and the industry all together at this particular time to ensure that we are all working towards to get to getting to things open up again before we get to see any normalcy. But as you mentioned, the flights are open right now. Of course, I mean, you could take all those measures and take a flight.
Right.
But would somebody want to fly this particular time? I don't think so.
And what about the cost of flying? I'm sorry to interject. What about the cost of flying? People are really concerned about that. Cost of travel, hotels, aviation, all of it. Is it likely to go up?
Well, the thing is, I mean, it can. If you were to put the cost behind it, yes, it definitely go up. But do you think people can actually afford that new cost that gets this circumstance, or would that be a stimulation enough to actually reboot the sector? I don't think so. So obviously, the industry would have to take a lot of the cost to themselves for the time being. I don't see, seat loads on airlines going up to levels of pre-COVID for the next couple of years. So I think we'd have to live with that particular aspect and see. And the companies who are flying planes, the people who are running hotels would have to, I mean, it's a known fact that I don't think that we would see any money being made in this particular sector for a foreseeable future. So yes, I don't think there is a cost factor to it. I think the costs will remain to the levels where it will be affordable and such stimulus can be created for the people. But even with that stimulus, or even giving somebody a free package right now, I think we need to ensure, or we need to project ourselves as being a safe, means of transportation across air, and a safe means for our hotels, for people to come and stay at our hotels.
Right. I'm going to jump across to Madhavan there. Do you have any insights to share with us in terms of the kind of bookings you're getting? What is consumer behavior veering towards right now?
So, like the other participants said, domestic tourism is the first one off the block.
Right.
We've got planes flying in the air.
Right.
We're seeing on an average 50 to 60,000 passengers flying every day, which I think is a very positive move. It's, confidence will take time to build, but my expectation is that it will be one of the drivers for domestic tourism to kickstart. So also recognize that people are locked up for a good 70 days, and what they call in the West the so-called revenge mobility is also going to show its head up here. I don't think it's any different. State governments, we've been working with state governments to kickstart with locations, and we are, as we talk today, we've uploaded domestic holidays, and the early queries are beginning to come in. We haven't seen any significant bookings.
But what kind of holidays do you think will do well? Staycations, road trips, wellness holidays perhaps now?
It's going to be a mix of everything. We're in uncharted territory.
Exactly.
Fear plays a much bigger role than anything else. I think it depends on the comfort factors of people.
Right.
You will see people either driving, flying.
Right.
Goa. I mean, Goa is a place that's going to be ready.
I have done it, but it does require it's a significant road trip to take. Rupinder, I did want to ask you this. This is important.
I was talking about flying.
Right. Well. Rupinder, how about quarantining? I think people are concerned about that you go into a new state and you're suddenly quarantined. When will we have some clarity on that?
Yes, I think there is definitely concern, but we will also need to respect the local state conditions, and we'll have to, I think, live with it for a while, because that's a territory where we will need the state administration interventions to really evaluate whether the state is truly ready to take people from outside or not. Probably it's a matter of a few weeks, and I think we need to bear with the state governments on that, because safety compromise is not going to bring us dividend. And if we have to create the sense of confidence in a traveler, then the narrative of the traveler that, okay, I went to a state and I actually enjoyed a holiday there and came back without any issues, is going to be a very necessary narrative. And therefore, you don't want to land up in a state and then say, oh, you know what, I had a problem. So I think it's important for us to respect the protocols on that as the way forward. And for bringing dividends along the way, it's important, therefore, to probably just hold on that little bit for some of the states at least.
Right. I mean, yes. Now, this is kind of an open question to all of you. It just struck me in the morning that, yes, you can do all of this. The government can do what it's doing. Everybody can work towards it. But how about the locals? How do you think visitors are going to feel welcome in destinations? How are we going to change people's behavior towards visitors who they might perceive as carriers of the disease? What can we do about that? What do you think about that?
So what's going to happen is that the opening of the domestic tourism initially for travel for leisure purpose will only essentially start from rural destinations. And when you talk about Delhi, for example, I think Rishikesh, Rajasthan, Himalaya, the Himachal belt, I think these will do pretty well once the state borders are all open. And I think, eventually, unless and until the cases start declining, I don't think anybody's going out anywhere. I think that's a normal prerogative which everybody's going to take that. But once cases are going down, the local economies such as Uttarakhand depend severely on tourism. So they will welcome these people coming in from Delhi by any means, my friend. I think there is no reason why they would not do it. For a simple reason that they're bringing in employment, they're bringing in money into their region. But as I mentioned to you, I think this will only have to happen once the state and everybody works together to ensure that at least there's, we've reached the top of the peak of the curve, and there is a definitive decline up, and then is when you start to instill confidence in people to actually taking this 2-day or 3-day weekend off in a drivable destination.
I produce a travel show, and my team and I have interacted with the entire cross-section of people who work in the travel industry over the last 3 years. Right from guides to hotel owners, people in the industry span the entire spectrum. When we talk of the industry being in trouble, to me, it sounds impersonal because it impacts people and their lives. Now, shouldn't that be our primary focus right now? The human element. Rupinder, your thoughts on that?
Yes, absolutely. I think, it's a sensitive issue in the sense that, yes, people's livelihoods and their very existence is dependent on the professions that they pursue. And you mentioned about so many smaller components out of the whole industry. And indeed, it is therefore a difficult time for the constituents of the entire industry. However, considering the impact of the pandemic and looking at the kind of impact that it can have, I think the first priority therefore is definitely to make sure that the pandemic does not further penetrate or cause more havoc at the medical levels. And yes, that's the only next level that can lead to an economic regeneration or rebooting or getting back to what we would all normally do. Therefore, in a sense, answering your question, the previous one, that whether people would be welcoming or would they still be apprehensive to have travelers around them, well, I think that's where everything has to fit in at the same time together. A few steps from the government, a few steps from the stakeholders, a few steps on promotional videos, social media, people's own inputs back saying that, you know, as I mentioned earlier, saying that I actually went traveling, I went for a driving trip and I stayed overnight and I was fine. I was looked after by whoever that I stayed with, whether a homestay or a hotel, that I actually had a great experience, that if I took a flight, my experience at the airport or in the aircraft was safe and I wasn't overly inconvenienced. I think creating those kind of imageries are going to go a long way in creating this, a sense of comfort, not only in the users, but also in the providers at the different levels. So it's a tough time, there is no question on that. Right. But I think we are gradually inching towards a comfort zone. And hopefully in coming times, we'll all be soon traveling back.
Madhavan, your comments on the same?
It's extremely unfortunate as to what has happened to the industry and especially the smaller players. But having said that, I think we were the first ones to get hit, the entire travel industry. Hopefully, we will be amongst the early ones to revive. But I think what the other speakers have said, it's extremely important that, one, the traveler gets the confidence to travel. And this can only be done with the hospitality sector, the governments, actually making the traveler feel comfortable and, safe when they travel. My expectation is that this will happen later. I mean, all you need to do is to get onto the social media and look at what the safety campaigns that each and every company is launching every day. The good thing is that everybody is preparing for the reopening. And whether that takes a little longer, it doesn't matter, because the primary driver is the safety of the traveler.
Great. Quite. And it's not just about not being risk averse yourself, is it? The thought that you might endanger others makes it a very different ball game.
No, I just want to say that what Rupinderji was saying is so crucial, because this is a moment where it's not about one stakeholder, the government, the private sector, the consumer, the society. Everybody has to come together to make things happen, because nothing is perfect right now, right? It is not the same world we exited in March and are coming back in June, right? Just to give an example, we also have a responsibility, like she said, to highlight the positive stories, because if you ask me, in our network, there's one odd case which happens where some locals will, have an objection to somebody coming in, but equally on the same day, thousands of check-ins happen without any objection, right?
Okay, folks, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to call it here. We're almost out of time, and it seems like we've just about started the discussion. The first step to seeking answers is formulating questions, and I think we've done a bit of that today. The one thing that has come out of this discussion is that we have to work together. Things like, competition will have to take a backseat for the time being. It's an unprecedented scenario, and there are no models in the past that we can look at for solutions. We can't predict what's going to happen, but if you're all together, then at least we have a better chance of getting things back on the road. On that note, thank you all for joining us.